The responsibilities and roles of each person during a team hunt in Tibia are different from the traditional MMO. Normally you have the role of a tank, the healer, and the DPS. And in Tibia, we have vocations that are based on those traditional roles. The knights will be the tanks, the druids are the healers, and the paladin and sorcerers are the DPS. Or so you will think, but in reality, these traditional roles can be filled by multiple vocations. Starting by the DPS, in Tibia, every vocation can output high damage, and this varies depending on the spawns, levels, and skills of the characters. In the majority of cases, the sorcerer and paladin do the majority of the damage, but if the spawn is weak to earth or ice, the druid could outdamage them. And in the case of spawns where you are hunting 8 creatures at a time, then the EK gets to shine, assuming he has the weapon to do so and the skills on top of it. Next up, we have the healing. Druids are the clear vocation for this role. They are essential for good team hunts, as they can output the most healing by far. However, sorcerers also end up joining this role later on, because the use of ultimate healing runes becomes very important for harder hunts, where the heals from the druid are not enough to keep the EK alive, but that's also on top of the EK healing himself every turn, with extra icons and health potions. So again, another role that is shared between multiple vocations. And lastly, we have the role of the tanking. This one is the Knight's strength, but by no means is unique to them. Paladins often become off tanks as they end up taking extra creatures near the EK to optimize the hunt even further. And in some cases, like duo hunts, or if there is not a knight for the team hunt, they can take up that role, assuming the spawn allows them to do so. So because of this, there can be multiple responsibilities from each person during a good team hunt, and the traditional roles are broken down into different branches that can also vary depending on the hunts. And on this video, I will be breaking down that. But before that, this video is sponsored by the guild Causality, one of the longest running guilds in Green Battle Eye servers, and one that I've been friends with for a long time as well. I'm very happy and thankful for the support of my content, and now for helping me make this different type of content as well. So without further ado, let's break down what makes a team hunt in my opinion, and the responsibilities of each player on it. The first one, and perhaps the most important, is the pacing. This one is mostly decided by the EK, as he tends to have the most control over the speed of the hunt. The faster the EK moves from pool to pool, the higher XP average you can get. But this can be achieved by other vocations as well, although more rarely, and it often depends on the spawn. For example, during lower level hunts, where creatures often are quick to die, and they also are not as dangerous to the paladin or sorcerer, they can be the ones to move on to the next pool first and start attacking sooner, while the EK stays behind to kill off the creatures and to loot them, which normally is what the paladin does. Both are fine, but for a better experience, you need to figure out who offers the most amount of damage. In the case of these two examples on were creatures or Among West, with ranged creatures in one spawn and multiple creatures in the other, the EK doesn't offer much damage at all, and the paladin is completely fine to have the aggro first and kite the creatures, so by going ahead and starting off the pool himself, it improves the pace of the hunt. The next part of the team hunt is also closely tied to the pacing, and that is the luring. Luring is the action of bringing more creatures to a pool. This has plenty of variables and is not unique to any vocation in particular. It's mostly done by the paladin in the lower levels, but by higher levels everyone starts to do it. It starts off with bringing enough creatures to make an apex on the EK, as sometimes the creatures are not close enough to each other, and you are left with a pool of 5, but slightly ahead there is another 3. Another example is when moving from a pool to the other, you tend to leave creatures on the way, and then the paladin is the one that stays behind to bring them with him. The next level of this will be to make slightly more than an apex. If the paladin or the mages are fine to have some damage on them by having extra creatures, and if the spawn allows that to happen, then that will improve the experience further. But this is on a spawn to spawn basis, because in order for this to work out, you must be luring creatures that otherwise wouldn't be killed. But if all you're doing is luring creatures from the next pool, then you end up not making an improvement, unless that is done in purpose, to make a hard pool slightly weaker by taking out creatures in advance. For example, this hunt in Old Fortress is pretty straightforward. You go from rune to rune and kill creatures there, with the occasional lures of creatures in the hole. But this middle part has creatures that are not quite enough to make a pool, so going there with a team is not worth it. So instead, what I will do as the paladin is to lure them to the next pool. In some cases, the creatures will die before I even bring them to the room, but by me adding that extra experience is more beneficial than attacking the creatures on the EK. And the next level of luring is when the spawns are massive in density and then everyone lures. This usually starts in the low 300 range with the trap style hunting, where the ED hugs a wall with a tree wall and everyone brings creatures to that spot. Examples of those hunts will be Catacombs or Summer Court, but there is plenty of spawns where this is doable. Basically, any spawn with a high density of creatures can be hunted this way, as long as the paladin is able to stay on the side of the EK and survive. In spawns with even more density and open space, then the mages run around in wide circles around the EK, and depending on the spawn and the paladin level, then he can either sidebox with the knight, semi-kite the creatures, or run together with the mages. Good examples of this style of hunting will be War Dragons, Isabi, and Ingol, and it could be considered one of the hardest ways of hunting because of the high amount of creatures. Additionally, another simpler way of luring is taking the creatures to the EK. Sometimes the knight won't have the aggro of some creatures or they just retire someone else. In the case there is an open space near the EK, you want to put the creature there so that he can rest them. However, there is the risk that doing that is too much damage, especially for a mage. So in this scenario, the paladin blocks the path of the creature as it moves to take the aggro and then he brings it to the EK. Or if it is also hard for the paladin to put it on the open space, then usually moving the creature one square away of the box allows the EK to move in quickly to rest, grab the aggro and move back. But additionally, there is another way. When somebody walks the creature near the EK, then anyone can step on the path of the creature for a brief moment and then move away quick. If done correctly, what this will do is reset the aggro of the creature and then go to the closest target, which by now, if the person move away, then the EK should be the closest to the creature. Moving on, next topic will be the tanking. This is mainly done by the EK, but as explained in the previous points, the paladin also takes up this role in the hunts with higher amount of creatures. But what I want to focus on this point is the positioning. As the EK, the goal should be to find a spot where ideally both mages can wave freely, and then stick to that spot throughout the entire time. This means always try to stand on the same spot. This removes variables that could make the hunts more random and dangerous. By doing this, the mages will know where to stand and be able to focus on just doing damage. This is something I don't see being discussed often, so I wanted to bring it up. Additionally, in the case of the paladin tanking, this also has variables. In the case of hunts where there is only a few extra creatures, you want to get the aggro of them, and then either tank them near the EK or semi-kite around him. This depends on your survivability. If you're dying by just tanking the creatures near the EK, then just moving slightly around him is better, because the goal of this, for starters, is to not have the mages have the aggro of those creatures. And secondly, is to have them within the range of the AoE attacks, so that they can also get damage. And once some of the creatures on the EK start to die, then you are close enough to bring them to him. But in the case of hunts where the RP needs to sidebox, you need to figure out based on the amount of damage you can tank. For example, in the case where you lure a lot of creatures and there will be multiple outside the boxes and the mages are trapped like in a catacomb or plague seal hunt, you want to try and stand on the opposite side of where you're luring. This is so that once you're tanking, the creatures from the lure are closer to the EK and target him from outside the box instead of you. So as the RP, you take less damage while still doing the off tanking. But if the damage is not an issue, then standing in the direction of your lure to set up the pool faster is better. And lastly, an important part that often paladins forget about is that even though you are the off tank, the moment the creatures on the EK start to die and there is open space on him, you should draw the creatures you have on him. This is important as then the EK can continue to do damage, otherwise he's left with no creatures to attack. The next topic is healing. This one can be simple in concept but hard in practice. The druid is always the main healer and his focus is on the EK. The Exorcio is a spell that can be spammed and should be used pretty much every turn, but this puts druids at higher risk than other vocations, because their healing turn is being used on somebody else. So in order to do better at it, you must also be guarding yourself up. This is done with better positioning and knowing when you need to use mana shield. In easier hunts, or rather in the lower levels, druids are often able to hold on to mana shield the entire time and reduce the risk of dying greatly, but this comes at a high cost. For one, it's more expensive to do, as you consume more resources, but more importantly, it is a bad habit to have, as eventually there will be spawns where through AoE attacks from creatures alone, you won't be able to hold on to mana shield the entire time. So the way to be better at this is to get comfortable with the mass rest. This means working on the positioning so that you can heal yourself and the EK on the same turn. But it also goes further, as in some hunts you're needed to also heal the RP with a mass rest, and then it goes even further when you need to have a different CO hockeys and alternate between the tanks, while also still including yourself in the healing with a mass rest or max beta. That's why, even though it sounds simple at first, it does get more complex as you do harder stuff in the game. But this also should not be the druid's entire responsibility. As the EKs, we are forced pretty much to be using our healing spell every turn as well. It starts off with extra Ico and then into Med Ico. Additionally, using health potions is very important. Often EKs will die without trying to heal themselves, because they just leave that role to the druid. Although there is a reason EKs don't just simply use health pots every turn, and that will be because they run out of mana quick and then wouldn't be able to do damage, and the priority should always be for everyone to be damaged in the pool. because Tibia is very much the embodiment of a good offense is the best defense. And lastly, sorcerers that for the most part are free to heal themselves also need to always carry some healing runes to use on whoever needs it. This is done by reacting to their HP, but often you get to understand the spawn good enough to know in advance when to use them. And in the case of difficult hunts, then sorcerers can end up using over 1k healing runes, and in the most extreme cases even up to over 2k per hour. This is something they are able to do because while using attack spells, you can use the healing turn in the form of the runes, so when hitting a wave, you can always draw a new H at the same turn. Unlike when using attack runes like a GFB, you cannot do it on the same turn, although it is possible once you understand the timing of the runes better to use them close to each other, but that is one skill that is very hard to master, and even the best players will miss some attack turns if they have to use UHs too much. And speaking of attack turns, the next topic is of damage. Every vocation is expected to do as much damage as they can. There is only a few exceptions of when an EK is hunting a spawn too hard for him and instead holds the Utamo Temple spell, but other than that, even the EK is expected to do as much damage as possible. This is because the goal from team hunts is experience, and doing more damage over time greatly improves the experience, and the biggest factor to doing more damage is quite simple: do not miss your attack turns. Every 2 seconds you are able to use an attack turn. This can be in the form of a spell, rune, or physical attacks. In the case of the last one, this one mostly applies to EKs and RPs, because physical attacks from weapons don't stop the use of spells or runes, but the spells and runes can stop the physical attacks if used first. So if you are able to master this, you can use an attack spell right after your normal attack goes through, optimizing your damage even further. As a paladin, it is one of the most important mechanics to master, getting the timing down of your diamond arrows to instantly follow with a rune or a spell. You can tell good players apart by how they optimize their attack turns. In the case of EKs, it's not quite as impactful for the team, but if you are able to get your normal attacks off, then you leech HP and mana from that attack, in turn making you slightly healthier while also improving your damage a bit. In the case of the mages, their one attacks is the least impactful. It only helps in some cases where you want to proc more sham attacks, like when dealing with influence or finished creatures in a pool, but that doesn't mean their attack turns are not important. In fact, they are often the ones that miss them the most. This usually comes in the form of not following their cooldown spells closely and then trying to use a spell that is still on cooldown. But a more common example will be when they move around to throw in their waves from different angles. Often the time it takes you to get in position of the wave will go over the 2-second cooldown of the attack turn. Most of the times we're talking about milliseconds, but these are the ones that add over time. Just like the other vocations, the more attack turns you delay by whatever reason will end up stacking on top of each other, and this is what affects your damage the most. And in the current metagame of hunting creatures with high HP where charms add a lot of damage, often you could end up doing more damage by just throwing in runes and making sure to fully optimize the attack turn. Although it's not optimal by any means, this is something that does help, only when you're actively missing turns by using spells. So take a look at your own gameplay and see how much time you're taking in between attacks. And for the last topic of team hunts will be the looting and splitting. The looting is mainly done by the EK. They are the vocation with the most capacity, so they are able to carry the most. But also by having the creatures die near them, they also get to loot them more often. The paladin tends to help with the looting when the EKs are going with a faster pace and moving to the next pool before the creatures die off. So on the way, they end up dying to the RP and MS normally, and this is when the paladin grabs the loot. In high-level hunts, especially with lots of creatures dying everywhere, then everyone helps with the looting, and one of the best ways to split up said loot is to have the party leader set the prices of the supplies and items, and use the party hunt analyzer feature with the help of third-party help. I personally use the Napbug that we have added in our Discord group, and then by tagging him following by split loot and then pasting the data from the analyzer, it does the splitting automatically. This feature is also available in Examopan on the Calculators tab. Both of them are promoted fan sites with even more features to help your Tibia hunts. But back to the topic of splitting up the loot, something that I often see teams wonder about is the imbuements. This is not included on the party hunt analyzer, and for the most part is not taken into consideration in hunts, because you expect everyone to be running imbuements, so the waste is more or less similar for everyone, with some exceptions on the EK when using elemental protections, but even that is part of the game. The only thing that should be taken out of the waste is when a defense spray is needed for a hunt, and then you manually add the cost of that into the waste and split it up, but that is also up to every group, and whatever works the best for your team. And that concludes my breakdown of what makes a team hunt. The only thing I feel could have been added is the schedules. Tibia often ends up being labeled as a second job for most people, because once you commit with a team, often will be a daily plan of at least 2 hours, and this is something that stops people from forming teams. The only thing I can say for this is to discuss it beforehand and try to be on the same page on how much your team wants to play. I've been on teams that do 3 hours a day, others do 2 hours, and currently for the past year, I've been doing mostly 5 days a week, Monday through Friday doing 2 hours a day with some bosses. There is no definitive answer, because it always depends on the individuals that form the party, but as long as there is some consistency, there will be results. So go ahead and try to find a team that fits your needs. Thank you for watching, thanks to Causality for sponsoring the making of this video, and also special thanks to not only Causality again, but Nightstar and Tuna Heroes as well.